And good morning, everyone. Happy New Year's Eve. This is Bryan with the Food Leadership Group. 2021, almost over. Not not a bad thing. So good morning, everyone. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, sponsored by EAS Consulting Group, and I'll give a little more details on that here in a bit. But my name is Bryan Armentrout, and we live stream every Friday at this time, 8 a.m. Mountain, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and we talk about all things food safety. So really glad you're here. Grab your favorite beverage and join us, and we'll have a conversation around food safety. And what's interesting about this and this live stream is that this is not a presentation. This is an interactive discussion, and it's meant to be that way. This is a way to share food safety information and align with each other around what we're up to, because food safety, when you work in this field, we all know that this is not a point of competition. Food safety is a collaborative effort, and everyone involved with food safety is trying to do the same thing. And in the eyes of the public, when they're consuming our products and our foods that we make for them, they don't care, right? They expect food safety everywhere. So the more we're able to elevate food safety in the marketplace, the better off we all are. So to get started off with, again, my name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. My email is here on the stream. Feel free to ask me any questions afterwards if you'd like. And one of the things that we like to do on this, and one of the traditions we have here, is for the new people who are joining us, let us know where in the world you're at. I'm in Loveland, Colorado, USA. So it's a little after 8 a.m. my time. And it's kind of a sad day here in Colorado on this Friday. We've had some wildfires. We had some very high winds yesterday here in Colorado, down by Boulder in the metro area, that a fire started somehow. I've heard different rumors on how it started, but this strong wind moved this fire very, very quickly. And this is a suburban area between Denver and Boulder where this thing popped up. And it's already burned 1,600 acres. I think I saw in the news that 580 structures have been destroyed, homes, businesses, you name it. So it's a kind of a sad day here. But luckily, as I can look out my window here, snow's on the way. So it's supposed to snow today and tomorrow, which is going to be the first significant snow here of Colorado, which is really weird. And hopefully this snowstorm will knock this fire down and keep it under control. So thoughts are with everybody with that. So hopefully everything there comes out well. So today is kind of an interesting show. You'll notice it's just me here today. I don't have a guest. We're doing something a little different here for the last day of the year, right? So for end of the year shows, you like to kind of do retrospectives and talk about things. And really what I wanted to do here today was do an Ask Me Anything. It's an idea for a section I've been playing around with, because part of food safety is a lot of times you don't have access to other points of view. So if you're working within a company, you have your team and you have some resources outside maybe, but not a whole lot, right? Your circle that you're able to interact with is relatively small, which is why we enjoy going to conferences such as SQF and things like this. We get to meet and talk with people who are doing the exact same thing we're doing, right? So we may be working in dairy, they're working in produce, right? We get to share notes and make contacts and hear new ways of looking at things. And with COVID, of course, a lot of that changed a lot in how we're interacting. So platforms like this hopefully are helping to spread that word on food safety. So Renee, my assistant, is here. So good to see you, my friend. James is joining us from Shaver Lake, California. Good morning. Kimberly is here in Vegas. And thank you very much, Kim, for your questions. We'll be getting to those here. And Florentina from Puerto Rico, beautiful. I've been to Puerto Rico, beautiful country. And definitely someplace from a business standpoint here in the U.S. with the arrangements with Puerto Rico, it's a great place to do business. My friend Melody is here. It wouldn't be a New Year's Eve show without Melody. Good to see you. So one of the things that we like to do here on the show in the beginning, before we really start rolling, is share a drink together. So mine is coffee. And later on today, it'll be something a little more adult focused, but for this morning, it's coffee. So please join me in a drink of your favorite beverage. Ooh, that's good. That is a good cup of coffee. So here in Colorado, Boyer's is a Colorado coffee company, and they do a great product. And my wife has really turned me on to the light roasts. So I've been doing a whole lot of that. And as you're for regular on the Food Safety Chat, you'll know that a few weeks ago I got the flu. I don't think it wasn't COVID; it was negative and things like that. But very much upper lung congestion and things of this nature. And this thing is still holding on. So excuse me in advance if I have to cough here on the chat, but I'll try and keep it to a minimum. But as you know, anytime you cough, right, you try and suppress a cough, it just makes the darn thing worse. So please bear with me on that side. So like I said, today's show is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be ask me anything, right? So around food safety, food quality, quality systems, management, leadership, all of these type of subjects, training, you name it. If you have a question for me, throw it in the comments and I'll work it into the conversation here. And as I'd mentioned before earlier, I'm getting better at this. Our podcast, our live stream is sponsored by EAS Consulting Group, and they are a consulting company based in DC with over 100 experts in the food safety area in any industry you can think of, right? So produce, dairy, beverage, CPG, meats, everything. And the average level of expertise in this group is over 20 years, right? And so one of the things that I've learned in my career is if I could go back in time and restart my career in quality assurance, which I definitely would do, it was don't try and do everything on your own, right? There's been there, done that. There's people who know how to do it. There's people who can do it quicker and save you a whole lot of headache of trying to figure it out yourself. And so it's my bet that a lot of this gray hair you see on me is caused by stress that I caused myself over my career. So definitely reach out and work with EAS. And of course, with the end of 2021, we're getting into 2022 and Q1, perfect time to do training, right? And get your skills upgraded. And as their sponsorship, EAS has given me a discount code for training, and it's Bryan, so Bryan. And at the end of the live stream here, I'll pop up the little chyron on that as well and run that past the screen. But if you find a training class at easconsultinggroup.com/training that you like, when you check out, you can then put in that code and get 15% off. So, right, you get the training you're looking for, and you get a discount too. So not a bad way to start 2022 for sure. So with that, let's kind of dive into these questions, guys, and start talking about these things. And definitely in your comments, I can see everybody's comments in here from the platform. So Renee and I will kind of go through these, and we'll go through this list of questions. So we came up with some really, really good ones. So I'm not going to mention anybody's names on these, but if you recognize your question, feel free to chime in if I'm not addressing it correctly or things of this nature. So first question, what are a few things that a business will overlook when they do their risk assessment that ends up being noticed before a third-party audit? Interesting. So you're getting ready. I'm going to assume risk assessment here means your food safety risk assessment. So not like food defense or things like that. And if I'm wrong on that, please clarify in the comments and let me know. But really, I mean, what do businesses overlook in their risk assessments? So I would say part of it is, and we'll get into this answer with some other things too, is it's not necessarily what you miss. It's what you put in that shouldn't be there. So what do I mean by that? So in your hazard analysis, in your food safety plan, and we'll stick with that example, right? HACCP's the same. But when you're doing your hazard assessment, right, your risk evaluation, you're looking at two main areas, right? You're looking at your materials and you're looking at your process. So a good way to think about this, right? I came from dairy, so I always think in terms of dairy products. And raw milk, right? Raw milk has inherent risks associated with it, right? It's known to harbor listeria. It's known to harbor salmonella. You could potentially have antibiotics in it from cows that were being treated that shouldn't have been milked and put into the bulk tank. These type of things, right? So there's inherent risk in the raw milk that's showing up at your plant. The other side of that then is your processes and your equipment. And there are elements within that that are meant to control risk. So for example, when you receive the raw milk in prior to pasteurization, you're putting it in a cold silo, right? So less than 40 degrees or what have you. And the reason for that is to control and minimize that risk for the raw milk, because you don't want that bacteria going into a log phase and really overwhelming the system, because pasteurization is not sterilization, right? You're shooting for a 5 log reduction or greater per gram or per mil. And if you have a whole lot in there, it means you're going to have a whole lot there when it comes out, right? It's going to reduce the shelf life on your product and all these type of things. So you're looking at the ingredient risk and you're looking at the process risk. Now, with that said, you also look at items in 3 main buckets in a production facility. Data comes in 3 sets. It comes in operational data, it comes in quality data, and food safety data. And those 3 things need to be kept separate. And so this is one of the things that I see quite a bit, is these things are all mixed up together, and that's a huge mistake. And a lot of times this may get caught before you have your assessment, but odds are it's something that you're looking right at, but you don't see. It's part of the reason why you want to bring in outside expertise to look at your programs and systems, is because you're looking, but you're not seeing. So you're walking by it every day and it's not obvious to you because you're not focusing on it, right? It's moved into the background, as it were. So operational data is things that the plant needs to run and be efficient and make a profit and all these type of things. So this is what the operations team is looking at to manage the business. So pounds per man hour, labor utilization, OEE, downtime, maintenance logs, equipment inventory, product inventory, orders shipped on time. All of these type of things is operational data, and the plant manager and his team needs that to run the business. How much electricity is the plant using, right? All these type of things are operational data. Quality data is a separate bucket as well. So quality data could be, for example, anything, and a good way to think of quality data is anything that the consumer cares about. And a lot of times people get that confused, right? They look at that internally and think it's what they care about. It's what external sources care about from a quality standpoint. So what's a good example of that? A good example would be weights, right? So if you have, let's say, a 62-gram product that you're selling, so you have to hit that target weight. And there are regulations and rules around how you can do that, right? In the NIST, right? And you have to hit your average weight for your lot, whatever you define the lot as. You have to have maximum allowable variation under control, right? There's only so far down you can go on those weights to meet that average. And it's generally about 10% under the stated weight. And making sure that you're as close to that target as you can. In addition to that, there are retailers out there who want stated weight or above. So if you have that 62-gram product, you need to be at 62 grams on every bar, which means whatever that bell curve is for your product, you need to shift that whole thing up and be aware of that and track those through checkwares and random checks on the line with scales with your quality team, et cetera, et cetera. Important quality data. Is anyone ever going to get sick because the bar doesn't have the right weight? No, they're not. And of course, that third bucket is food safety, right? So let's say the metal detector on the line, or your allergen testing, or these type of activities around food safety. And this question around the risk assessment, I think, is a really important one, because it's what you put in that you shouldn't put in that often gets missed. So I've seen lots of food safety plans that confuse this, and they put food quality and even operational data in the food safety plan, right? So you're taking that data from the food safety bucket and confusing it with the other stuff. So essentially what you're telling FDA when they show up, or any other regulatory body, is you consider those things to be a food safety risk, and that is completely wrong. I've seen yeast and mold listed on food safety hazard assessments. That's food quality, right? People are going to complain if the product is moldy, but it's not going to make them sick, right? Granted, opportunistic things and immunocompromised and what have you. But if you buy a loaf of bread and it's moldy, right, you throw it away or you take it back and you complain. It's a food quality issue. So if you have a mold spec of less than 100 per gram and you're over that, and it's in your food safety plan, you've told FDA that you have violated your food safety plan and you are producing unsafe product. Huge, huge mistake. So back to the question, right, is what are the things that a business will overlook when they are doing the risk assessment that end up being noticed, right, before a third-party audit? And that's one of the big ones, right? That's kind of the big thing that I see repeated time and time again. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, I'll swing back and we'll talk about it a bit more. And of course, guys, as I'm talking about things here, and you get additional ideas on clarification or things you want to know about it, throw it in the comments. Let me know, and I'll throw it in the conversation here. Next question, and these are around kind of this relationship. We'll put these three questions together and talk about them. Can regulatory people and business owners ever build meaningful professional relationships that improve food safety culture? Why do you think some regulatory staff are allowed to be abrupt, rude, and unprofessional with business owners? Interesting. So I served on the SQF Technical Advisory Council for 6 years. And so under the standards of how they are maintained, right, there's rules. So you have the benchmark standard, GFSI, and then you have the standards that are related to that, right, for requirements. And they're, again, benchmarked to that standard. And those standards are accredited. And so that falls under ISO, right? So 17021 and 020 on how auditing companies can manage their standard and the rules and the things that they need to have in place. And one of the things that we used to talk about, and this is part of the requirements with SQF or BRCGS or anybody else, is you have to have industry oversight bodies that assist with the standard. So there was two. There was a technical advisory council and the certification body council. And we would meet and go over the standard and discuss things. And the reason I'm bringing this up, and Melody in our conversation here will know this very well, is that we would talk about exactly what this question is bringing up. And why is it that we have, and we refer to it as auditor calibration, we have a wide variety of auditors. We have auditors that are superstars. We have auditors that are kind of the middle of the pack, and then we have auditors that are problem children, for lack of a better word, right? Kind of like in this question, right? They're rude, they're abrupt, they don't write up their reports very well, what have you. And it was a constant struggle to get everyone to that median point where you had calibration between auditors. And that's exceptionally difficult. And the reason for that is that auditors are people. And we have different backgrounds and different things we focus on. Anybody who's been through an audit knows this, right? So if I come from an industry where pest control is super important, so let's say bakery, and I become an auditor after I stop working in that industry, and I'm auditing bakeries, am I going to focus on pest control? Oh yeah, you bet I am, right? It's something I know, and it's something I'm familiar with, and it's something as an auditor I am comfortable with based upon my career. Now, part of this as well is that auditors want to help. And sometimes they cross a line and they start consulting, right? An auditor's job is very straightforward. It is, here is a standard. Here's what the standard requires. Here's the evidence that needs to be presented to me. Does this match up, right? Plan, do, check, act. Blocking and tackling, right? Basic quality assurance is super, super important. So here's what you're required. Here's how you do it. Here's how you check to make sure that it's working properly. And here's the proof that you did it. And if it didn't work the way that you thought, here's the corrective action process I follow to get that back on track or modify that to the new procedure. That's it, right? That's it. And auditors will sometimes stray outside of that and say, well, you know, here's how you should really do that. And that's consulting, right? That's what I do. I'm on the consulting side of things, right? I'm helping companies get ready for those audits and doing that in a way that that SQF auditor, whoever, can understand it. And I think a lot of this around this question too, on that people side, is being an auditor can be really, really hard. I ran the auditing and certification group within Eurofins North America. And auditor calibration was very important to us as well. And as we said, auditors are people, and you're on the road all the time. And if you're a good auditor, you are super busy because you're in demand. And you're traveling on a weekend and you're getting somewhere on a Monday and you're doing the audit over the next few days, and then you got to get the audit completed and back for technical review. And all these things need to be completed or moved along before your next audit, right? Because then work just starts piling up and you're constantly playing catch up and sitting on the airplane with your laptop like this, and you're trying to get all this work done, and it can wear on you, and it's challenging, right? You have to, if you're an auditor, you're doing it because you love doing it. And some days people have hard days, right? And they may be rude and they may be abrupt. And if they continue that pattern every time they come to your facility, well, then maybe they're just a rude and abrupt person. And that relationship needs to be managed. And I think at the root of this question really is just like everyone else, right? People break down into two areas, right? You have your human relations side of things in management and relationships and diplomacy and negotiation and all these type of skills that we need to be successful managers. And then there's the technical stuff and understanding the standard and all of the things, right? If you work in quality assurance, you have a huge breadth of information you need to know and understand. In quality assurance and food safety, we are sticking our nose into everybody's business, right? Because we are setting up a standard. We are setting up the rules of the game in that facility. And we tend to focus on that technical side of things. And that's important, absolutely. But the people side is just as important. Anyone who's led quality assurance knows that you just can't throw the data that you collect under the nose of the CEO and expect him to understand it. You have to be able to explain to her how this data is relative to the business, how it's a risk to the business, and how it can affect profitability. Right? You have to speak their language. And with that, being able to negotiate and further the interests of the business is just as important as the technical side. So the auditor may be having a bad day, right? Treat them like a person. And if it's really impacting the audit, pull them aside and say, hey, listen, Sally, I totally get everybody has bad days. Are you okay? Right? You may be surprised that they turn around. They may say, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm out here on the road and my dog's sick and I'm really worried about my dog. Who knows? Who knows what may be driving that behavior? Part of it too is within the field of quality, right? There are very high standards that we maintain, and sometimes people get frustrated that those standards aren't being met, and they don't necessarily know how to reach those standards, because that could be part of it too, right? Cortland made a comment here. Nobody likes to get caught out of compliance and do not accept challenge as well, especially management. Management must profess high quality products. Absolutely. Here's a bit of advice and something that I would always train my quality managers on is I would say, use this. Now you can change the wording around, but the intent needs to be there. During the opening meeting, you need to say something along this line. And by the way, the opening meeting should not be just you and the auditor. You need the whole team there, right? You need to show the auditor that this is a team effort and it's just not the quality person who's working on this. And if it is just a quality person working on this, you got a problem. Anyway, so the quality manager during the opening meeting needs to say something along this line. Say, okay, Miss Auditor, super glad that you're here. It's been a year, amazing how time flies, since you were last in our facility. We really appreciate the audit you performed last year, and we got those corrective actions in on time, and hopefully everything worked out well. But beyond that, we are always improving in this facility. And I'm really, really excited to show you the enhancements and the improvements to our quality management system what we've made under SQF in this following year. Now, to be clear, and now this is the important coming here, guys. Now, to be clear, we're auditing to SQF version 9, food sector category 11 for food safety. If you have any suggestions, outside of the standard, we would love to hear them. And then you smile, right? And the auditor says, well, of course, thank you, right? And you start going into the audit. What have you done? You set the boundary, right? You set the scope, and it's really, really important you understand that scope. That scope may be SQF, it may be FDA, CFR regulations, it may be, if you're working in HR, it may be OSHA. You need to understand what is that boundary and what is the frame that you're working within. So what does this do for you? This allows you to circle back in a polite way if that auditor starts going off the reservation and starts consulting, right? Well, you should really be doing it this way. Okay, great. Thank you for the suggestion. I don't know where that is in the standard. Can you point that out? Oh, well, no, the standard doesn't say that, but you should really do this. Oh, so this is a suggestion. And you smile, right? And the auditor will go, yes, it's a suggestion. Now, if the auditor starts going into territory where their consulting is now overlapping into the audit, you do have recourse, right? You can talk with the certification body afterwards and the technical manager, or you can do as I've done in certain situations, you can actually call up and talk with the standard while the audit is going on and say, hey, listen, I have an interpretation of this particular standard and the auditor has a different one. Here's what the standard says under 2212. Here's what he thinks. Here's what I think. Who's right, right? And solve it right there, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So hopefully hopefully that helps out here. Next question. So kind of in the similar vein, so we'll knock these out. What is one thing that food business owner operators want the inspector or auditor to know about doing business in your community? Oh, interesting, right? So that's a really cool approach, right? Give them that context, right? And your framework should share that already within the description of your business. So for example, I work with some smaller bakery type companies here in Colorado who sell into wholesale distribution and things like that nature. So it's very important to tell the context of your story and how you relate within the community and what type of products you're selling and who it's meant for and all of these type of things and understanding that context. If you're selling candy for children and you're not addressing that in your food safety plan, that's a huge error, because if you say general community, that's not correct. So part of this is the auditor needs to understand the context, because here's a little dose of reality. Companies are judged differently depending on their size. We all know it, right? It's an unwritten rule. So the small mom and pop company with 20 employees is going to be judged differently by the auditor than the massive aseptic dairy plant with 800 employees and a huge budget, right? With different department heads and all these type of things. The programs need to be there, but unconscious or whatever, the auditor is going to take that into account. So if you're working in that large plant and you have a quality manager and a technical manager and a document manager and an audit manager, and yeah, we wish, right? And you have different departments within that auditor is going to hold you internally to a higher standard, and you need to be aware of that. So making sure to set that context with the auditor is going to help, and you need to understand it too. So hopefully that helps address that. How can a regulator help make an inspection a little less painful and a little more enlightening? Right? This is a two-way street. And auditors are there, the good auditors, right? And we all know the good auditors, right? When we go through a good audit, we're like, oh man, that was awesome, right? It's because that auditor is providing value and they're helping you become better. That's the bottom line, right? That's the purpose of why you go through all this work, is you want to be better. You want to be better at food safety. You want to be better at food quality. You want to be better at operations. You want to raise the bar. And if you have a good auditor, they are going to help you do that without consulting, right? That's the line. They're not there to boss you around. They're not there to tell you how to do things to make their life easier. They're there to improve your systems and your programs and to make sure you're the best that you can be. And when you find an auditor who can do that, man, that's amazing. Cortland said, tell jokes, right? Absolutely. Auditors are people, right? And if you come in there with a dour demeanor and you're a grumpy auditor and you consider the plant guilty until proven innocent, it's going to set the tone, right? So having that auditor calibration is super, super important. And if it's done correctly, you can get amazing results out of that. And so when I was at Eurofins, for example, my best auditors were booked a year or two in advance because people wanted them to come into their facility and help them. And that's what a good auditor does. So hopefully that answers your question. So let's see, what other questions do we have here? This one's interesting. Why are recalls down in 2021? So if you saw my food safety chat last week, I did a quick analysis on complaints for 2021 and versus other years. And oh yeah, they're down. Bottom line on this, right? There's some very good information out here on this. But the bottom line is, from my research, nobody's really sure. Is it because there was less inspections done by FDA? Maybe. Is it because quality professionals and food safety professionals were paying much more attention in the plants because of COVID and really looking hard at how things are transmitted and how vectors arrive within the facility and how you handle new employees and what do you do if someone is ill? I would imagine that's got a big piece of it too. But the bottom line on this question, and it's a good question, thank you, is that we don't know yet. We don't know, right? And that's something that I think is a hard thing for quality people to do too, right? Because we're technical people. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. We need more data, right? We have some initial indications of why, but we still don't know the full reason. Hi, Jill. Good morning. Good question here from Jill. What are your thoughts about bringing CBD products into the food system? There's little to no regulation on it right now compared to other foods. Oh, huge. I have clients here in Colorado in this space. And here's my off-the-cuff reaction to that is, and what's interesting is Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court actually made some comments on this last week that I saw, essentially saying that the time for the federal regulations around marijuana is gone, right? And it needs to be removed, which I agree with. In the THC and the CBD space, and we'll talk about these together because I kind of view them the same, is these products, when this whole thing began, right, which was a huge revolution, is they were not looked at as food. They were looked at as delivery vehicles. So you were making a drink or a gummy or what have you as a delivery system for the drug, the THC or the CBD. And they weren't looked at as food. Now, here in Colorado, this varies by state. For example, Washington State is very different. They follow FDA. But here in Colorado, they follow the regulations for health boards, right? So restaurants and things of this nature. And so in the city of Denver, Tri-County Health is responsible for the auditing and management of these companies. And as we all know, working in restaurants and in that industry is very different than food manufacturing. And what the investigators and what the auditors are looking at are completely different. The model for FDA needs to be what's followed nationally. And so hopefully once these things start being organized, that will be the course that it goes through. As then it becomes just like any other product, like dietary supplements or things of this nature. I would imagine that's probably what would fit under, and managed accordingly. Because from my experience, food safety is not being looked at. And we've seen some recalls recently for salmonella. It needs to be looked at as food. It needs to be managed for allergens and everything else that we do from a food safety standpoint. Because the bottom line is people who are trying these products for the first time. So say somebody like me, right, an old dude who's never tried these products before. I'm not going to smoke a joint. Gross, right? They're smelly and stinky and you get smoke in your lungs. Who wants to do that? If someone's going to ingest these type of products, Jill, they're going to use edibles. Right, of which there's mechanisms around that too, on how the metabolism works and how long it takes for those to take effect in your body, which people may not know either. So this needs to be looked at, and this entire industry needs to be folded into the realm of how food safety is managed. And we're not there yet. So let's see how all that goes. So what is the main cause of allergen recalls? And so this is an interesting question in that a lot of people think allergen recalls are due to cleaning or sanitation failures in the plants. And my finding in my work in this area is that's not true. That can happen, but in most cases, that's not the cause. It's due to mislabeling, or it's due to changeovers. Those are the two main culprits, right? So you have packaging that remains in a filling machine and they're doing a changeover to a new product and they forget to change out the packaging. And one packaging has a allergen label on it. When they do the changeover and the cleaning, the next one doesn't, or vice versa. Sorry about that, vice versa. And now all of a sudden you have an undeclared allergen. The other thing is labeling. So a lot of times companies are constantly changing and updating their labels, and they don't have good revisions. And marketing makes a change for a holiday packaging that's a special 3-pack for Costco or whatever. And the labels don't get checked closely enough, and the declaration statements aren't correct. Right? We have sesame coming up here in the very near future that will trigger some of those as well too. But labeling and changeover errors are the main cause, in my experience, of allergen recalls. Jill here, I'm worried about the lack of reputable analytical concentration testing, right? So they're working through the testing piece of this as well too for CBD and THC, because part of this, right, is sampling and how are you getting an accurate reading? Because if you're out of spec, right, if you're high in that particular count, right? So I think for THC per dosage here in Colorado, right, it's 10 milligrams per serving, and that's it, right? If you've got 15, and you can't rework that product, it's garbage. So analytical testing is very important for these companies, and that's very expensive. So they want to make sure to get it right. And sometimes they may have several labs that are doing the results, and they get different results, right? So that's part of it as well too. Part of this is within the plant. Concentrations of the drug, THC or CBD, vary by location, right? So part of this is where you're sampling from. So it's a continuing fight for sure. And Cortland here had said as well, USP, right? So USP has monographs and standards associated with that. So just a couple more good examples of how bringing this under a standardized regulatory framework is going to benefit everyone. Alcohol is also considered a drug by definition. Yeah, true, right? So it's just a matter of what drugs are accepted and what aren't, right? So nicotine and these type of things too. What do most people get wrong in their food safety plan? I kind of answered this already with the auditor. It's the incorporation of incorrect data. And I see this time and time again. And where, for convenience sake, information that is not food safety related is put on documentation where it shouldn't be. So what do I mean by that? So for example, you have a form in the plant, and you have an operator who's running a filling machine. And at that filling machine, you have, let's say, the metal detector as the last step at that filling machine. And that operator is filling out the documentation, and he's filling it all out on one form. And on that form, you have the metal detector check, right? He's running wands through every hour to make sure it's working and that the kickoff is working and all that stuff. They have weight checks. They have seal checks. They have lot code checks, right? Label checks, all these type of things that they're doing, and it's all written on the same form. And at the bottom of the form is a big box for downtime, operational, right? Where if that machine goes down, the operator needs to record the downtime and the reasons for the downtime so that plant management can see that labor is being used efficiently, where maintenance is spending their time, all of these type of activities. Well, on that form, you now have a combination of 3 different types of data. You've got food safety in your label checks and your metal detector. You've got food quality in your lot code check, your seal check, and your weight check. And you've got operational in your downtime and your labor usage and these type of things. So you may be saying, so what, right? Why does that matter, Bryan? It matters because of this. You have given FDA now carte blanche to look at everything on that form. Remember, FDA has access to food safety information. That's it. They don't have access to food quality. They don't have access to operational information. If you put everything on the same form, you have now given FDA access to all of that, right? And it's not necessarily just the investigator who's at your plant. If FDA chooses to, and generally they don't do this, right? It's going to be a bad situation if they do this, but any documentation relative to food safety, they can make copies of and take, period, right? And you hope that when they redact, that proprietary and business trade secret information is protected, but it may not, right? And who's looking at that information? That information is now divorced from you, right? You have no ability to defend it or explain what that form means, because let's say there's somebody sitting at CIFSAN who's looking at that documentation, trying to figure out what it is that you're monitoring and manage it. So let's say on that form you had downtime, and the machine was down for 4 hours because of a conveyor belt failure. And the operator notes that on there like they're supposed to. Well, now a scientist may look at that and say, well, hold on a minute here. So there was food sitting in that machine for 4 hours growing bacteria. How do you know there's no toxins or salmonella that grew or what have you? Prove to me that you don't have a food safety risk, right? Now you put yourself in a bad spot. Now you've got to try and defend and prove a negative, prove that you don't have. And it's things that, if you have your documentation correctly, shouldn't even happen that way, right? Your food safety information needs to be documented separately so that you can explain to FDA or regulatory agencies what it is and why you do it and the results of that. That's what FDA is interested in, right? You need to be able to walk them through that process and explain it. And don't show them things that are just going to confuse the issue, right? So if you have allergen controls for labeling, if you have allergen controls for sanitation, you have metal detector checks, startup inspection logs, those things all need to be clear. And those need to go in a file by production day that the PCQI reviews, right? That's another huge thing that people miss. The PCQI, the preventive control qualified individual, forgot the Q there, or designee, right, which need to be trained, needs to review the food safety information to make sure that all the parameters of your prerequisite and your preventive controls equals CCP in most cases, are being met and are signed off on within, 5 business days after manufacture. A lot of companies are missing that. Do an audit in that on your company. If you pull something away from today, do that, and you'll be very surprised at what you find in a lot of situations. So that's a good question too. So switching around to the other side here, what makes for a good training program? This one is a challenge. And within companies, a lot of times the quality professional, say you're a quality manager working in a plant, you will take that on yourself, right? And here you are, a quality manager, and you're trying to manage all of the training programs for everybody in the company. Recipe for failure, right? What you need to understand as the quality manager is how training works. And I could do a whole show on this, and maybe I'll do a whole show on this. But a trainee breaks down into 2 main areas. There's what everybody needs to know, right? So what are the different things in a production facility that the team needs to know to be successful? So let's say good manufacturing practices, lockout, tagout, bloodborne pathogens, all that information that everybody needs to understand in order for people to produce safe product. And the quality team definitely helps with those. Now here's the other side, is job-specific training. Is the quality manager responsible for that? Outside of quality, no, they're not. If I am the supervisor of that filling machine, it is my job as the supervisor to make sure my team is trained in how to operate that machine, right? So how to set it up, how to load in the film, how to set up the heater head, how to set up the right speed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Training happens on the floor, and that needs to be documented. That supervisor needs to be able to explain to quality as part of the training, so in SQF 2.9, on how that works and what it was that makes that person competent to perform that task, right? So that's the short answer here. So definitely on that side, if you want more information on that, we can help with that. So next question here, I'm trying to get through these as much as I can. Why is FSVP so hard to follow? If you see my posts weekly, pretty much every single week, somebody's getting a 43-year warning letter from FDA for failure to comply with FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification Programs, because it's different, right? It's got its own section in the CFR, 117 1.5, right? Not the normal 117 that we're used to, right? So 21 CFR 1.5 is FSVP, and there's special regulations set up for that. And if you are the individual, your company is the ones bringing this product into the country, you're the consignee, there are requirements that you need to do. There's documentation that you need to fill out with Customs and Border Protection for bringing them in and coding that appropriately. You are responsible for understanding the hazards and how those are being managed. Are the manufacturers, let's say a company in Vietnam that's selling you cinnamon, and you need to understand what are the risks with cinnamon, right? And Appendix 1 is very helpful for that. And how are they controlling those? And if they're not controlling those, how are you going to control those? And companies miss that all the time relative to FSVP. Think of FSVP as an entirely separate program from FSMA, right? It's got its own rules, it's got its own requirements, and you need to understand those and work with procurement and other agencies within your companies to make sure that you're compliant with FSVP. And if you're working with companies who are the responsible importer of record, you need to understand how they're managing that for you. So if you're using a broker and that broker is bringing in coffee beans and they're the importer of record, what are they doing to control risk? You still need to understand that, just like you would any other supplier, to make sure that they're doing their job appropriately. So make sure and jump on that. FSVP is huge. What do you do for foreign material screening besides metal detectors or X-ray? Right. So this is a big one too, guys. Half, 50% of all foreign material recalls are for non-metal. Half of all foreign material recalls are for non-metal. So how do you address that, right? X-ray can detect non-metal, but it needs a density gradient to do so. So if you're producing a product, let's say you're making a granola bar with oats and almonds and cherries and all kinds of yummy stuff with all kinds of different densities, that X-ray machine is going to have a really, really hard time picking out a stone or picking out a piece of glass. Very, very difficult. So how do you manage that? Your pre-op inspection, super important, right? You need to identify in your processes, where are the things that are at risk for falling in the product that are probably going to get through my screening system at the end. So a good example of this would be, let's say you have a plexiglass shield on a machine. Right. So these doors are being opened and closed all day long by the operators and they get damaged, right? They're slamming them shut and the plexiglass gets cracked and there's a little piece missing. How many times has an auditor been in your plant and say, oh, I see this window here is cracked? Well, number one, you can't clean it, right? Because now you've got a surface in there in that crack that can't be cleaned. And if there's a piece missing, that auditor 9 times out of 10 will say, oh, there's a little piece of plexiglass missing here that's over this product that's heading down this conveyor. Where's that piece of plexiglass? You need pre-op inspections to cover that. And that's how you manage those, right? So pre and post, right? So just like your metal detector with your startup inspections, you're then able to bookend, as I say, that product and limit the potential risk associated with that, right? Where you may have to go back and do some additional screening or inspections or things of that nature, but at least you've got a framework to operate within. So Courtney had a comment here. Still suggests food industry adopt a RX360 system. So I'm not quite sure what that is, Cortland. So if you could give some additional information on that, I would appreciate that. Very interesting. So a couple more questions here. I think we can get these in. So definitely I want to save some time here if anybody else has questions too. And also I'd like to know, do you like this, right? Is this a format that you're getting value out of with the Ask Me Anything type approach here? If it's something you'd like to see more of, let me know in the comments and then I can do that for you. What do people miss in documents? Oh boy, this great question. And it's not what you expect, right? We're really, really good in quality, really good at documenting what to do when things go right. Right? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? For receiving or what have you. We're really bad at what do we do when things go wrong, right? Because the assumption is that things are always going to go right. If it doesn't go right, we do a corrective action and we train people to get them back on track, right? We all get the corrective actions from suppliers or other manufacturers where it says trained operator. right? When I see those type of corrective actions, I'm like, really? I doubt that's the root cause, right? There's something else going on here. So what do I mean? Oh, and thank you, Cortland, here. So RX360 is a big pharma way to perform foreign material inspections, right? The perfect example, and thank you, Cortland, a perfect example of how we can share information across industries, right? We tend to work in silos, right? The produce guys don't talk to the meat guys, don't talk to the dairy guys, don't talk to pharma or dietary supplement. We can all learn a ton from each other. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So we'll close out on this question here of what to do when things go wrong, right? And in my book, I've got a whole section on this and how to create this. If operators are trained properly, and we'll stick with the receiving example. If they're trained properly, they know how to receive, right? The supervisor has trained them and oversees them and knows that they're doing their jobs correctly. What they need to know is, what do I do when things go wrong? And identifying in that work instruction, what are the things they need to be concerned about? So for receiving, right, you need your documentation for the load when it shows up in the plant. You need the bill of lading. You need the certificate of operation of the reefer, or what have you, right? You need to make sure the temperature is reading correctly, all these different parameters. The seals on the back of the truck, if it's a full truckload, need to match the seal numbers on the documentation. You need to know from the procurement group or in the logistics group what is supposed to be showing up and what's not supposed to be showing up. So you need to understand all these different parameters. And if I'm receiving and a truck shows up, and I go outside to check the documentation, and I go to the back and notice that there's no seals, what do I do? Right? Do I just go and bring it in and put it in the rack and tell the quality manager later and let him figure it out? No, right? You need to address that right then. And this then moves into what I call spheres of responsibility. So as the receiver, it's my job to make sure that the seals are intact. If the seals are not intact, it now becomes the supervisor's job. And she then needs to figure out what is that needs to be done in this situation. Do we put the product in quarantine? Do we contact the quality manager? Do we make the truck sit in the yard until we're able to figure out what the heck happened with the seals? All these type of things, right? So it's a very simple example of what do you do when things go wrong, and your process needs to reflect those. And again, when you look back at the 30,000 foot level, what am I talking about? This is plan, do, check, act, right? Plan, do, check, act. So when you explain to the auditor, yep, here's the standard we meet, here's how we meet it, here's how they were trained, here's the documentation they fill out, and if there's a problem, here's what we do about that, and if we need to, here's the corrective actions we follow. You've made that auditor's life super, super easy, right? And circling back to our questions at the beginning, they're going to be happier, right? Because now the audit's going smoothly and they're getting the answers that they need to complete the audit. So last question, food safety culture. How are people implementing food safety culture? So if you've been watching this show, you know that we've been focusing this a lot. And the bottom line on this, to close out our talk here today, is if you're the quality manager who's looking at this, this is a company burden. This is not your burden to share. You need to share it with others, right? And this needs to start at the top with the CEO and the senior leadership saying, food safety is a high priority for us. We will never compromise on food safety. We are going to put the resources in place for food safety. We're going to make sure that everybody in this company who has an impact on food safety is going to be held accountable, right? So R&D, marketing, procurement, operations, quality assurance, legal, communications, everyone. And they will be able to explain how they impact food safety, and they will be evaluated on that. Now, picture yourself as an auditor going in and looking at that. That's food safety culture, right? You don't need to solve world hunger, but you need to make that linkage, and that's where it starts. And this has been an interesting challenge for us in the food industry to think outside of our box and get beyond just our technical skills and really move into that managerial space of influencing up and negotiating and all of the skills, all those people skills that everybody else in the company relies on as well. We need to rely on those too and build out that coalition. And it's a big challenge, but I think, and I strongly believe that this can be done. So that finishes out the list of questions I had here. Thank you, everybody, for contributing those questions. I really enjoy it. This is kind of fun. It's a fun, interactive way to deal with a whole bunch of topics and talk about those things that are really bothering people, right, and are out there. And as mentioned earlier, let me throw this. This is pretty cool. This little banner. Isn't that cool? Again, EAS Consulting. Thank you, EAS Consulting Group, for sponsoring this food safety chat. And at the bottom here, I've added in the Chiron where you can then again take a look at this and get your discount on training, right? We all need to be improving, because if you're not improving, you're degrading, right? There's no sitting still. In food safety, it's a constant challenge, and there's new things that surprise us every single day. So get the training, get your team trained, get other people trained, right? Get it all out there and use those resources out there that are here to help, right? That's why I love what I do. I love helping and answering questions like this. Oh, Cortland had a question here. Are competency testing being performed on management? Right? If they're sitting in the GMP class, right, they're taking that test, right? Probably. But overall competency testing, no, right? I would say no. And they're integral, right? This ties into this whole food safety culture, and they need to be held accountable, right? If you're impacting food safety, right? I mean, think of the impact the maintenance group has in the plant on food safety. Wow, right? Huge impact. So think about that, right? This time of year is always the time where we like to sit back and reflect on what happened and what we need to do in the next year. And it's a wonderful time to do that, right? So I encourage you to do that as well. I know I do this quite a bit. And 2022 is going to be better, right? We're in the golden age, right? It's going to get better, and it's going to keep continuing that way. And you're part of that. So I applaud you for being here and taking the time on your New Year's Eve to learn and grow and appreciate food safety. And I appreciate everyone out there for all that you do, right? Because we're in the same boat. And food safety is something that we take for granted sometimes, but I don't, because I know all the work that goes into it. So thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it. And to go back and circle back on what Kimberly and Wendelin are saying, Happy New Year, right? Enjoy your time tonight. Be safe. Hopefully the fires here in Colorado are gone. Oh my goodness. I haven't been looking outside during this talk. It is snowing. Awesome. So yes, right? So this is our first snowfall of the year, believe it or not, on the last day of the year. And this snow is going to go a long way to stopping that fire. So good news all around here in Colorado. So wherever you're at in the world, be safe. Have a great new year. And we'll see you back here next Friday, January 7th. Wow. For the next food safety chat at 10 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain, and we'll dive into our next food safety topic. So hope you enjoyed this Ask Me Anything section. I know that I did. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you guys back here next week. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.